the gentlest protest song I know. It doesn't protest gently, but it sounds gentle. It's called What Have They Done to the Rain? Just a little rain falling all around. The grass lifts its head to the heavenly sound. Just a little rain, just a little rain. What have they done to the rain? Just a little boy standing in the rain, the gentle rain that falls for years, and the grass is gone, the boy disappears, and rain keeps falling like helpless tears. And what have they done to the rain? Just a little breeze
Năm 61 đến 64 từ tầm 72 á. Coi như mày mai xã là thuộc cái bùi gì không biết mà chẳng có không có, rồi là đánh nhau, rồi là mình xung phong, rồi là đối là một cái mắt cái mũi nữa, cái đặt mắt ông như đương cái xã chứ cả. Rồi ra cái chất gì đó là coi như không có chẳng có, mà thấy củi đó là trôi tróc hết, là cái củi mà phục khuê là năm 73 đến chứ.
The gentle rain that falls for years, and the grass is gone, the boy
April 29th, 2003. It is the most beautiful season in Japan. Cherry blossoms at our mountain house must be in full bloom. Greg lies in a hospital in Tokyo. He had been admitted 10 days earlier, complaining of a persistent stomach problem.
Everything is okay. I'd like to see you, have a couple beers, have a long chat. Yeah.
His condition was deteriorating so fast, and the doctor's prognosis was less than a week. I could not tell him that he had only a week to live. I did not want him to live without hope for the remaining few days. He passed away on May 4th. The diagnosis was liver cancer, thought to be caused by exposure to Agent Orange. He had always been strong, healthy, and active. His sudden death left me lost. The life I had alone seemed so long and meaningless. Greg and I met in Kyoto in 1970. It was a time of student unrest. I was a student at Kyoto University, and Greg had come to Japan after serving in the US Army in Vietnam for 3 years.
At 18, I fled suburbia, tripping into the dusty, corrupting enlightenment of the bloody Vietnam War, never to return. Liberated, I enthusiastically abandoned my previous lives. I have, metaphorically, ever since floated through time present, past, and future. I became an exile.
I was working all over Vietnam, from Da Nang to Saigon, everywhere, Pleiku, Nha Trang. During Tet of '68, I was in Da Nang Way area. We were overrun by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong for 3 days. I think that was the most dangerous situation. A lot of people were killed.
He had gone back to America briefly after his duty, but was deeply disappointed and hurt by the reception of American people and decided that he did not belong there.
The first things that happened was I went to San Francisco Airport. That's where you got out from the military. Said somewhere in San Francisco. I forgot, not the airport, but and then somebody yelled something like "baby killer," threw a Coke at me, which is interesting because they threw a Coke at me because that is the symbol of capitalism. I suppose they were right to a certain degree because obviously the Vietnam War babies did die, and if you were there, you were part and parcel of it. But nevertheless, I never personally did anything like that. But and then I was assaulted, not physically, but intellectually by various people, such as people who would say, I was in the Korean War, you guys didn't do enough, you should have killed those commie bastards, you hippie, yippie, commie, pinko bastards. And when you sit there and try to explain them the realities, they wouldn't listen because I was only 21. I still had to show an ID to drink a beer because I looked young for my age. And then I would have the other side saying it was a baby kill. And nobody would listen to you because you had no credentials other than having had the experience. And nobody would listen to somebody who had the experience. So it was very frustrating.
He told me that we could not have children because he had been exposed to defoliants in Vietnam. But I did not take it very seriously. After all, having a family was not foremost in our minds at the time, and the notion of exposure to defoliants was not real for me, a young student living in peaceful post-war Japan. It was nothing more than headlines in newspapers. So it had gone out of my mind almost totally till I had to face his death. Since that first day, the fact of his exposure to defoliants never came up again between us. In fact, he was very reluctant to talk about his Vietnam experiences. As we got older, I became more aware of the deep scar the Vietnam War had left in him. This made Greg strongly anti-war and anti-authority, the convictions which guided him through his career as photojournalist. He was covering Asia mostly for many international magazines, including Time magazine, for which he was a contract photographer for over 10 years. In the early 80s, he was one of the few photographers to return to post-war Vietnam. He loved Vietnam and kept going back at every opportunity as if he was trying to get something out of his system by immersing himself in the country that had transformed him from a naive and innocent middle-class American teenager to a man, introspective, free of the confines of his native country, its culture, and prejudices. Philip Jones Griffith is a photographer whose book Vietnam Inc., published in 1971, had a big role in changing the course of the Vietnam War. He was a colleague of Greg's for 25 years. They traveled together on many photo assignments in Southeast Asia. He was the first one to point out to me that Greg's illness was likely related to Agent Orange exposure.
I first met Greg Davis in the late 70s, probably 77, I think, in South Korea. I just bumped into him in the city. And I remember thinking, wow, what an amazingly different sort of American, because unlike most photojournalists, he would stay in the best hotel. You know, he was sort of very happy to be staying in a little Korean hotel, sleeping on the floor. And as I got to know him, I realized here was a born anarchist, in the best possible meaning of that word, anarchist. He believed nothing he was told. He automatically looked behind the facade. He automatically questioned everything. And I thought, wow, this chap is really interesting.
You know, I think everybody, when we said, like on, what was it, September 14th, we said democracy is dead. It is dead, because information is a lie, like burqas. They never wore burqas except during Taliban. No, that's bullshit. They never flew kites. They never wore makeup. That's all it says. And today, our interpreter is saying he had a TV during the Taliban time. You see, the thing is, it's not what politicians say and the military commanders say or Bush says. It's what our driver says. It's what the guards say. It's what our interpreter says, and it's what people on the streets say. And they would tell you what is happening. And you just go through border checkpoints and you discover it yourself.
Now, he didn't talk much about his past. He was conscripted into the army at a relatively early age, came to Vietnam, realized immediately that it didn't make sense. There was something very wrong about what America was doing there. He told me that very often he was sprayed because the amount of spraying was very heavy in that part of the country. And he mentioned this in context of why he never had any children with his wife Masako. He explained that he knew he'd been sprayed so often, having children was just too much of a risk. It was tragic that, at an early age, 54 years old, his liver explodes.
Unable to cope with his sudden disappearance from my life, I needed to find out why he had to die so early.
If Indochina goes, several things happen right away. The Kra Peninsula, the last little bit of end hanging on down there, would be scarcely defensible. The tin and the tungsten that we so greatly value from that area would cease coming. So when the United States votes $400 million to help that war, we're not voting for a giveaway program. We're voting for the cheapest way that we can prevent the occurrence of something that would be of the most terrible significance to the United States of America, our security.
In the 1950s, American government began increasing its involvement in the war in Indochina. As the revolutionary movement intensified in the South Vietnam, the American government started to use defoliants on the battlefields. The first spraying of chemicals was carried out in August 1961 on the northern side of Kontum along National Highway 14, destroying mountain fields and agricultural products. Within 2 hours, all plants sprayed had withered and died. The test was considered a great success. This operation, called Operation Hades, later renamed Operation Ranch Hand, had two aims: to defoliate the trees to facilitate surveillance and to reveal the hiding places of the enemy, and to destroy crop in order to cut the source of the guerrillas' food supply. The defoliants were called Agent Orange because of the orange band painted on the drum cans to distinguish from other chemicals sprayed. It contained dioxin, the most toxic chemical invented by man. The idea of making a documentary on Agent Orange came to me a few months after Greg's death. I started to read many books on the subject and was startled to find out that many American and Vietnamese veterans of the Vietnam War were suffering from similar symptoms as Greg. David Klein served in Vietnam and now is the national president of the organization Veterans for Peace.
I know a lot of guys who got sick, a lot of guys who died from that stuff, you know what I mean? You know, we're sitting right here by the Hidden Casualties Memorial, and a number of them died from cancers, you know, so, you know, but I just was recently back to Vietnam with a group of veterans to participate in an international conference of Agent Orange victims. And toured Vietnam. I was in Hue, I was in Hanoi, I was in Saigon, I was in Cu Chi. And what they got over there is they got a number of people who were second or third generation children with, you know, it's like, it's not just the people that were exposed, it's going on second, third generation, you know, because it's a genetic thing. If you get it in the gene pool, and I saw stuff over there that made me so ashamed of being an American that I don't even know how to say it.
Going through the photos of our happy times, I came across some snapshots that I had forgotten about. These are the pictures Greg took while he was in Vietnam as a soldier. He had shown them to me before, but since they were not particularly good pictures, I remember wondering why he thought them important. But now they meant more. How could I find out anything more about them more than 30 years after they were shot? I remembered Greg told me rather recently of a surprise phone call from his buddy during Vietnam War, Mark Landgren, who now lived somewhere in the US after having lived in Kyoto for several years in the 70s. I went to look for his phone number and called the Oregon number, though I was not sure it would still be in use. I visited Mark, showed him the pictures, and he immediately confirmed that they were of the base in Lon Tan, where Greg was stationed from late 1969 to April of 1970.
Like if this table is all woods, rubber plantations, and just trees and jungle, here was Lon Tan right there. And all the way around it, there was just nothing growing. And it was just dirt road in and dirt road out.
Mark was also sent there, but could not bear the sight of it, and he walked back to Saigon the next day. He was sure the area was sprayed with Agent Orange.
The base camps were actually getting sprayed more than people realized, you know what I mean? Because they were doing the whole perimeter, did everything to kill the weeds, you know? So you could be anywhere. You could be, the idea that you had to be out somewhere in the jungle and they're spraying you is a misnomer. You know what I mean? They were spraying everywhere that Americans were because they were trying to kill the weeds.
Although I had visited Vietnam a few times in the 80s with Greg, a lot of the memories were blurry by now. Stories he used to tell me rushed back to me. I wanted to see again for myself where all those things happened to him. I asked Philip to go to Vietnam with me to see what was happening with after effects of Agent Orange. He had just published a book, Agent Orange, The Collateral Damage, and was very much committed to the issue. We embarked on our trip in July 2004. I had no idea what to expect on a Vietnam trip. I thought we would have to look for Agent Orange victims in the corners and nooks of the countryside in Vietnam. Instead, I found they were everywhere, so immediate and present, in the countryside as well as in the cities. In some villages, victims were living in households nearly next to each other. I had considered the possibility that the Agent Orange damages may be exaggerated by Vietnamese government. But what I saw was so far beyond what anyone could fabricate to promote a political agenda. One of the goals of our trip was to find the base where Greg was presumably exposed to Agent Orange. Lon Tan is located near Bien Hoa, which was a major US base during the war. Our guide had a hard time finding the place. We asked around, showing the pictures to mostly older people who might remember. After all, 2/3 of the Vietnamese population now were born after the war. Finally, we came across a Mr. Pham Van Ha who could take us to the spot. Trees have been planted, and the area once so desolate is now green. but dioxin contained in Agent Orange went deep into the soil, cells, and molecules. Bien Hoa area remains one of the hottest spots with dioxin contamination today. Lon Tan district has a population of 230,000, of whom 1,000 children and adults are affected by defoliants. I was suddenly surrounded by the legacy.
Thì rồi cháu vậy bỏ ra anh chồng đứa vợ đứa cứ nấu ăn xong 10 giờ là cứ anh đứa cho ăn mẹ đứa này thì nó quấy đến 8 giờ tối nó ngủ khi đó mẹ mới được nghỉ á.
Có lẽ có chiến tranh chứ để lại vợ em là đi khám 45% chắc không cho 8 nữa không giảm lên nữa. Thì mưa ba mẹ con đi khám á 45% chứ đâu cho 8 đâu. 2 năm nay 91 mẹ thì 45%.
Chị ơi, chị mẹ cháu chị tên là gì ạ?
Lê Thị Mỹ Tiên.
Cái hồi nó là giải chất khai hoang chị biết không?
Không biết, em không biết.
Sao không biết? Cha mẹ biết chứ.
Em sinh 1967.
Cái mùi nó thơm á, nó thơm hành cái trái ẩu mà chín á. Dạ thuốc là mình cái bay cho nó nghe nó ù ù bên trên trời luôn mà mình cũng không có thấy cái bay nó cũng ù ù ở rảnh. Nhưng mà vô làm nghe cái mùi đó là y như cái mùi ổi chín. Nó thơm vậy đó, nó không có mùi cái dạng như tôi cái xanh này ra đó là nhiều bị lắm. Có đứa 2 sinh sống không có đứa 2 mắt mù luôn, dạng 82.
Tu Du Hospital in Saigon is one of the largest maternity hospitals in Vietnam. It is busy with happy, expectant mothers and families returning home with newborn babies. There is a section of the hospital, however, called Peace Village. Here, about 100 children born with different degrees of deformities are living together.
Since 65 to 69, I was a student working in this hospital. So that I was surprised about the increased incidence of those malformations and diseases. But I didn't know what was the cause. But after 75, when the veterans group, American veterans group came here, and then at that time only I realized that there was some problems with the human health because of the spraying of toxic chemical substances during wartime in Vietnam. We sent the samples of blood or the adipose tissue of our patients with cancer, the patients with deformed babies, to Canada, to West Germany. Very surprised result that show that dioxin level in their body is much higher than in the north of Vietnam, or in the other region that haven't been exposed to Agent Orange or dioxin. The breast milk dioxin level in breast milk up to 1,450 ppt parts per trillion. It is very high, the highest level in the human being since the beginning of the dioxin history.
Small children that I see in the Peace Village, so they are being born now, and the mothers were not necessarily exposed, but maybe their grandparents.
It means that their mother or their father may be exposed to dioxin through the breastfeeding.
It's the third generation.
Yeah, the third generation. In Vietnam, for many years already, especially in the south, we teach the young doctors and the midwives to do the ultrasound exam, to teach them how to detect very early the congenital malformations of the fetus, so that we can remove them out of the uterus before birth, so that is a means of therapeutic abortion, so that we can avoid the birth of many deformed babies and children that we have to take care of. And it's really a burden for our society as well as for their family.
Dạ, thích là máy móc.
진짜 일본어로 할 때? 됐습니다.
これは修理着替え直すあとは何でもどんな機械でもあって書きますその手字を書きました
そうですか。はい。この辞書はいいですか。はい。コン。
Không.
コンコン。コンコン。
はい、không có.
いいえ、難しくないです。
みんなで。
はい、みんなで。
はい、みんなで。
いいえ。
いいえ。難しいです。
もう一回。
Bấm về gặp lại.
How do you see the future for them?
Oh yeah, you see, it's very difficult, but they are very cheerful. No, they don't know. Sometimes I feel very bad for them, pity, and sometimes I cry for them. They really don't know about their future, and they are very cheerful.
A variety of tests were also conducted in several localities near Saigon. Near Long Tan, a roadside was treated with dinoxol sprayed from a buffalo turban mounted on a 2.5 ton truck. Results were considered fair to excellent. Those chemicals already proven most effective as defoliants will continue to be used until faster acting types can be developed. It should be noted that the chemicals, when used appropriately, are harmless to man and do not render the soil unfruitful beyond one agricultural season. Defoliant operations are continuing on a daily basis in the Republic of Vietnam. Targets are vegetation along lines of communication, roads, canals, power lines, and railroads. The number of ambushes in sprayed areas has dropped to practically zero. Military worth has thus been established.
The use of Agent Orange contaminated with dioxins in Vietnam apparently began approximately 1962 or 61 and ended, we believe, about 1971. It was the largest known dioxin contamination to date, and it involved certain areas in the south of Vietnam only. Fixed-wing aircraft sprayed Agent Orange in perhaps 15% of the south of Vietnam and none of the north of Vietnam. And we later found, when I started going to Vietnam in 1984, that we could measure the one type of dioxin that contaminates Agent Orange and which is harmful to humans in some people in these sprayed areas and just about no one outside of the sprayed areas.
You could take these tens of thousands of flight legs of a plane and translate them into what happened on the ground, how many gallons landed in an individual square. And if you can take these colors in your mind and translate them into pictures of guys on both sides slogging around in fields and peasant, the places where the fighting was, where the people lived too. And then instead of just looking at little squares of ground, I could actually put how many people lived in each of those squares of ground. And we calculated that probably 4 million Vietnamese were directly sprayed by the herbicides.
Central Highlands are where the spraying was particularly heavy. The poverty adds to the plight of the families with the victims. Quang Tri province is one of the poorest in Vietnam, and Cam Nia is one of its poorest villages. Philip calls it the village of the damned. We arrived via Route 9, which was one of the supply routes during the war, and was a target of spraying.
About 97 or 98, a friend of mine came across a village in central Vietnam which had the highest percentage of deformed children. The water that came down from the mountains to the east side of the A Shau Valley ran down streams and rivers into the Cam Nia area, which is another reason why it was heavily contaminated. The actual spraying maps show the way in which Cam Nia was sprayed regularly. All of those reasons means that the people in Cam Nia were well and truly doused with Agent Orange during the war.
The poverty is apparent when visiting huts where often children with different disabilities and deformities lie on the dirt floor.
Dân số ở đây là 5.000, đến thời điểm chưa là 5.673. Đây là số trẻ em từ 0 đến 16 tuổi đó, 0 đến 18 tuổi đó, là 158 người tàn tật. Thì từ khi sinh sau năm 80 thì có những cái đứa trẻ ra đời thì người ta nghĩ ngay là họ cũng không biết đó là bị ảnh hưởng chất độc màu da cam, mà người ta nghĩ là do di truyền hoặc là như thế nào đó là bị tàn tật. Nhưng mà hơn nữa là từ những cái thông tin đó thì mình cũng nghĩ là những cái trẻ em tàn tật mà trên Cam Nghĩa ở đây thì một phần nào cũng do là chiến tranh hoặc là do chất độc màu da cam.
Cái đồ
ở nhà chú Hùng á. Chú con. Chú cái phần lớn chú ấy đó.
Giỏi, ui giỏi dữ giỏi. Thật tại gan ông bị gan ô đi. Cảm ơn ông này, cảm ơn ông bị má này. Cảm ơn, cảm ơn đi. Ôi trời giỏi, cảm ơn. Cảm ơn đi, cảm ơn ông Tây má này. Cảm ơn cậu nữa. Cảm ơn đi. Kêu cảm ơn ạ, kêu cảm ơn. Thả tay vô tay sơ bộ.
Dạ, cảm ơn.
Dạ đi. Dạ đi. Ốm trước là cùng đi lính cho Mỹ đấy. Chứ hắn ai là đi tôi xin hắn là sau 2 của tàu bay thả. Thì khi mà hắn mới 1 tuổi thì ra chiều chiều đây tôi sụt cỏ đó là cứ bo trưa đó mà coi nữa là mịt đâu là chết hết rồi. Mà hồi nữa thì miệng lạc hầu thế cái cây cối hắn thả thuốc xuống rồi rùi đi ra hắn nứt cái trôi lên là miệng hại ăn. Ở đây thì khi ở đây thì buổi sáng là một chiếc chi tàu bay của Mỹ lên thả rê rồi là khói mù rồi là vì chỉ vô gia ở đến sáng ngày mai sáng ngày kia rồi là có với cái cối với là thèo hết. Trên còn người kia thế này đi trên lá là hắn kêu những cái dạng ấy con chí ạ, kêu như dạng ấy con chí ạ, chứ sau 1-2-3 ngày là có dân hết kêu như rượu. Cái con chuột con đôi chỉ là cái mình rửa mình dám nữa dám lâu lắm mới mơ mắt bữa bà Hàn Mỹ đó có hỏi hồ nói đi đấy họ ra quán xóm đây con mới xin mấy ngày mơ mắt bố tôi nói tôi rửa chú thì xin con mà đi ra hỏi hồ thì con thì mấy ngày mơ mắt đấy là dám rửa dám rửa có 2 tuần là bắt đầu mình mở lên là rửa mình kêu rửa ra cái tập đi cái thế là nằm ngã thôi, bữa tập là tập ngồi nè, đóng cái ghế tập ngồi xong rồi nó lại là tập giác hẳn đi.
Từ ngày tập đến giờ là thấy khá đấy.
Mình nghĩ có tiến triển chính luôn, có tiến triển đấy. Đi về chỗ quậy, dắt đi, mà dắt đi nó tập, trưa, đừng chơi đi, quản giỏi, trưa, đi quản một cái, đi với chú ra quản một cái, hắn lết ra ngoài đường là dòm, chứ rửa lớn đi ra, lết ra ngoài đường là dòm. Đó nhóm đây nữa. Đi trường đừng gì mà đi đừng gì mà đi trường đừng gì mà đi con
đi ra tập được ngoài đi trái nên là chủ lại keo luôn
bảo được ngã con đi mà đi ngoài sông con đi ngoài sông con đi bữa ra ngoài sông đi ra ngoài sông đi ra ngoài sông con đi ra ngoài sông phục hồi chức năng đi ra ngoài phục hồi chức năng đi ra mình mà đắp đi đừng mà nó bịt ngã chứ chủ tay đừng nam mình đỏ vô đi nam đi mà gì bên ngoài này đi đi vào chủ này đi vào chủ một cái mà đi vào chủ một cái đi
trời giỏi quá
giỏi vô
đi lui được không lui được à
được rồi giỏi dữ chưa đỏ giỏi lắm đỏ chỉ là mình to mà nó to đấy
có hẳn phải tập cho hẳn
đúng tập để đi ngoài đồ đỡ chứ ôi khổ chứ bây giờ chứ trong là có kinh tế để mà tập phục hồi chức năng cho cháu để đi ngoài đời mẹ ra bớt quá khổ ấy.
thì đặc biệt ở xã Cam Nghĩa là một trong những xã là có những cái lượng trẻ em tàn tật quá nhiều, cho nên ở cái lớp trẻ giống như người ta mới xây dựng gia đình họ rất là họ rất là sợ cái thứ nhất là sợ giống như họ có thể sinh con là biết đâu được là họ là một trong những người mà gặp những cái hoàn cảnh sẽ sinh ra những cái đứa con giống như trẻ em tàn tật ở ngay địa phương.
In towns and villages in Kwanchi and across the old demilitarized zone, I am to encounter many more families, often with more than one child with disabilities and deformities. As I witnessed family after family struggling with burden of caring for children, I was moved by the love and compassion that I saw, and it was a healing experience for me.
Nhiều bạn mới được mà truyền ai đó cũng được.
My sadness, deep and incurable as it is, in face of what they are going through, seemed less significant. But the care the families give to the children and the fact that they have each other made me feel envious. At least they are not alone.
Nuôi hàng chục hàng năm bà khổ ấy. Ôi ơi. Thật. Nhưng mà thì đi ngủ, đi mau cái đi lâu đi không được, thả không được.
In Vietnam, I witnessed people with extraordinary deformities and handicaps, yet living a full life, calmly accepting fate. What they are asking for is not revenge, but practical and specific help.
Biết ai lỗi, chứ biết ai lỗi ai phải.
Chuyện tính nữa.
Chuyện tính nữa chứ biết ai lỗi.
Sau khi vào bộ đội thì như vậy là năm 80 là bắt đầu qua ở bên Lào thì đánh với quân Phỉ Phang Phao, thì trong đó là có một trận đánh.
Sinh ra trả thứ hai là đến năm 92 đó. 92 là mình đi là nuôi 2 cháu một ngày 6 bữa ăn. Rồi là phải nói chung là sinh hoạt của cháu nó không biết gì nữa, nên hắn chuẩn bị là chơi cháu đồng kính lên kính là chuyên môn tiểu với đại.
A father whose son has been bedridden for 18 years only asks for a wheelchair so that he can sit in the garden and look around. It costs $50, which is beyond their means.
Cho cháu vào trai chứ không có nơi nhiều nữa.
My wish is just I can live longer.
Chứ bị đá.
Suốt ngày thì bố ở nhà thì bố cõng nhau mà không em ở nhà cũng phải cố cõng cho ra. Mà không có bế chặt cái này nó ôm chặt cổ mình ra để mà không biết.
The town of Kanchi is where some of the fiercest fighting took place in 1974. Because of its proximity to the demilitarized zone, this area was heavily defoliated. Our guide Juan said, "Now we go to the house with a boy with 2 heads." I did not know what to expect. 10-year-old Hua is an older sister of this 2-headed boy. She is on her way home where the family awaits. Her parents say she has difficulty learning, which may have been caused by Agent Orange also. Xuan, 8-year-old boy with heavy deformity, is the one we came to meet. Though indeed very heavily handicapped, I did not find him atrocious looking.
Chắc chắn là bị Gia Lai Cung Tung.
This map shows the locales of the Vietnam tests. The first location near Kon Tum was a region of frequent guerrilla activity. Trees in a forest along the roadside north of Kon Tum were sprayed with dinoxol.
Bởi vì đợt nữa là em đi làm rừng nữa. Vì khi chuẩn bị ra quân là có lên làm rừng 1-2 tháng để ra quân. Là hồi đó em buộc rừng để xẻ gỗ. Vì coi khi nữa là có khả năng bị đâu. Giai đoạn đó là bởi vì chứ đi thì đông nhưng mà số anh em là thường họ làm ngoài thôi, làm ngoài xã nữa. Tôi 2 thằng tôi là có thêm đứa bạn nữa, nên tôi đứa bạn là đi vô rừng để mà cưa xả nó vô trong sâu, chứ thằng tê về chết hết rồi. Chết vì lý do gì? Thì chết thì nó đau bệnh rồi chết thôi, chứ mình không biết là vì cái chi, nhưng mà thằng là chết rồi, chỉ còn là một mình em thôi, và 2 thằng mà đợt vô rừng sâu nữa.
Xuan's father, Doduk, 36, is a farmer. He makes $200 a year growing rice on his 200 square meter land. He has 3 children with his wife, Won. The eldest daughter, Hien, 12, helps him with his farm work full-time because her mother takes care of Xuan around the clock. Now she is helping her father prepare rice for sowing the following day. Doduk works as a laborer between 2 crops to find extra money. The pigs and ducks he raises earn him $10 a month, but life is never easy.
Con báo cũng là chứ. Chúng xô chúng là xẹp, để bá mới xẹp nữa luôn.
After watching the loving care the family gives him, I started to feel very close to him too. His smiles, responses to mother's care, it made me think what a handsome boy he would have been had he been born normal.
Này là không cho bắt tay. Này bắt tay nè. Em cưới đi, em cưới đi. Sinh viên cùng sinh tài cũng trở thành luôn, mà đều sinh viên ra thì coi như là cũng trong xã trở thành, mà đều sinh ra là coi cái cô đợt này là cô mới ra trường á, cô thấy ra rồi cô đi kêu cái anh mà trạm trưởng đến đó, cô thấy chị tật chứ rửa, và sau là kiểu bông về nhà nuôi thôi, cho con là tết mẹ đó, cũng cho là chị thấy cháu nữa. Vì cháu cái kiểu kèm như rồi đó, rồi chị xíu á, và em mới đem về nhà là có gì nội ngoài tập trung lại nuôi tại nhà, nuôi cháu tại nhà, là con chị nằm lại tại trong xã, trong 1 tuần nữa khi nào mình về nhà được, mình biết là cháu gì cho con cũng cho thấy khi nào là rút lại viên kiểm cháu lại là bông về nhà thôi. Khi nào chị về nhà thì có chị xíu cách 2 ngày chị mới tìm vậy nữa. xỉu luôn, gắt xỉu luôn á, không ăn không uống gì hết. Là có gì năm nữa là thấy con nói, chúng mình nói rằng mà sinh thằng cú ra mà giống cái con quỳ chí ạ. Cảm giác của chị thì nói đi giống cái trời, giống cái thọ đình cho số phận của ai vợ chồng rồi thì có gì cũng chịu thôi.
Nhưng mà
cố gắng là nuôi cháu để có gì để bằng các đứa trẻ khác. Vì con mình sinh ra thì mình có trách nhiệm để mà nuôi cháu nhé.
Nhưng ông cũng lòng thôi. Làm trẻ nó cũng nắng. Ôi đẹp quá. Sao lại có bóng hoa gần nó nữa?
Liêu. Ngày thứ hai là họ tới thăm mà cho một cục sữa đó tôi cho uống tới mới hết lúc khi nên tôi cho uống tới hết. Mà khi nên uống rất men. Em biết lần đầu lần uống ngày thứ hai là uống được nửa ly nữa rồi. Qua ngày thứ ba rồi tứ rồi trở lên là chúng là ăn uống luôn, chúng lông sữa này là cô gái Lan này là anh uống một ngày này, lòng này uống bít ngày. Từ giờ nữa mới đâu thấy con hẳn phát triển, mặc dù bị tật nhưng mà cái thể lực quán á, cái thể khám hoàn mình. Từ giờ nữa cũng vợ chồng nữa cũng nuôi đâu cho ăn bột chứ sao nấu cháo đó nó sáng, ra chân nghiêng ra chân nữa thì tập ăn lên rồi mới nuôi. Thì bắt đầu cái rồi bảo chị người ta cũng lên mình có một số mới.
Lúc quạt lấy 100 còn 60 đi 3 chứ 1 thằng 17.
Đi đâu rồi bá ơi? Đúng vậy.
Ông ở Đài Loan đi kinh phụ thuộc theo kinh tế nữa. Kinh phí của hắn á, kinh phí ít quá thì thêm thử mới phẫu thuật được. Kinh phí nhiều thì có gì cháu là phẫu thuật được.
Em đi đâu mắt
Là biết là khi mà sinh cháu ra khoảng 3 tháng là biết, nhưng mà cũng chưa chắc. Vì khi là nghỉ coi nói chung biết thì biết, nhưng mà một phần đôi lúc mình cứ nghĩ là theo cái đầu khổng của mình á, đầu lương của mình là cứ nghĩ là một là có thể do chất độc da cam, mà hai là có thể do là một cái hệ quả nào đó. Nhưng mà mình nghĩ là nếu như hệ quả thì mình liên hệ là trong cái dòng tộc của mình là không có ai bị hết. Nên từ chỗ đó là mình khẳng định, người ta cũng cho biết như thế. Mà nhất là cái khi phẫu thuật cú, cái phái đoàn đó đầu về họ cũng khuyên ăn mình không nên sinh nở nữa, vì sợ là cháu sau cuộc sinh thêm nữa sẽ làm không hoàn thiện á. Mà họ cũng trách nhiệm mình, nhưng mà họ cũng cho biết là vợ biết, bí là chồng bí, đại khái là họ giữ cái hạnh phúc á. Cho người ta nghĩ là nó chắc chắn là sinh nở nữa là hắn sẽ không hoàn thành. Thì từ chỗ đó là mình nghĩ là chắc chắn.
Khi đi học vậy khi đi học với con ở nhà
Chăm sóc em là cháu thấy vất vả.
con thấy vui hơn. Khi em đi học là chỗ mấy bữa tí là ở nhà em hay cười và đi lên học.
Friendship Village outside of Hanoi was founded by an American veteran, George Meisel, who himself died of causes thought to be brought by exposure to Agent Orange. Many children with Agent Orange-related disabilities are taken care of here. Sue Jones is an American veteran of Vietnam War, who is the forces behind this village now.
I arrived in Vietnam in May of '68 and stayed here until June of '69. We were up on I was with 3rd Marine Division, and we spent all of our time along the DMZ, the parallel between the two countries. As luck would have it, I arrived at a time of probably the most intense fighting. We stayed in the bush all the time. We'd go out for 2 or 3 months at a time because I was what they call a Marine grunt or infantry unit. So we were just constantly out in the bush. The DMZ area, the Ashall Valley area, especially the Ashall, because that's where part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail went through. That was sprayed a great deal. Highway 9, which went across, was sprayed. So yeah, we were sprayed. We would see the planes, we were sprayed quite often. We were always told that it was mosquito spray. And I'm sure the people who told us it was mosquito spray was told, they didn't know either. I live in a cabin in Alaska, very small cabin, 65 miles from the closest town. And I just realized I was spending all my time isolated and finally recognized that, being in a depression. And here I was, almost probably 50, 52, 53 years old. And I just decided, you have to do something. You can't just sit out here the rest of your life in a cabin. And I put myself into this program in Seattle. And after that, I started feeling fairly good, and I decided I was physically and mentally strong enough to come back and see Vietnam, and that's when I returned. During the war period, I realized I never saw Vietnam. I saw jungle trails, but I never saw the country. I never talked to, I don't ever remember talking to a Vietnamese, or ever seeing one really, except at a distance. I realized, I'd been over here fighting and knew absolutely nothing about this country. Had never even talked to anybody from this country. And I finally said it was time for me to come back and know a little bit and find out what Vietnam's like.
And what was it like? What was your first reaction to a second time?
Well, I think any vet who comes back is fearful. We don't know how we're going to be received. Personally, I have a lot of guilt about Vietnam, and I have a lot of guilt about my country, so I was really very concerned about if I was going to be received well over here. I had no idea. But I just knew I had to go find out. We landed in Ho Chi Minh, Saigon, which I had never been to. But I was in my hotel room, and I said, okay, you didn't come to Vietnam to sit in your hotel. Go walk around the block one time and see what it's like. I was really scared. So I did. I finally got my courage, and I walked around the block. It was the very first day, and this man, a little bit younger than me, I find now it's very typical, came up to me and wanted to know how old I was and if I was married, and asked me the basic questions. And finally he asked me, he said, have you ever been to Vietnam before? And I said, well, yeah, I was here in 1968. I said, I was with 3rd Marines. And he looked at me and he pointed his finger at me and he said, well, you're the enemy, aren't you? And my heart kind of dropped. I really got scared, and I said, yeah, I was the enemy. And he put his arms around me and gave me a big hug, and he said, welcome to Vietnam. I've always been healthy. Of course, you don't know what's going on inside your body. But I was very angry. But what I was really angry about was I was talking with vets, American vets, who had children in the 70s being born without legs and arms. And the government was taking absolutely no responsibility. We're in the 3rd generation now. These are not children from the war. These are children 3 generations after the war. And they get no help because this government just don't have the money. And the U.S. is in denial. It makes you realize that wars don't end. They just go on and on and on. And that's why you don't have wars. There's some children, for instance, who are so mentally disabled. If we can teach them to stay clean, or to feed themselves or to dress themselves, then that's one thing we can do to help take some pressure off of the mother. So there's very little we can do. My big goal, and we're working at, is trying to make the Friendship Village as much self-funding as possible. Because all the children have been affected by chemicals. And we thought, why have vegetables with chemicals? So now we have this new organic, it's all composting, it's brand new. And we hope in the future to be able to sell our products to the people in the area, make some money for the village. We have another wonderful story. A young couple met. He had severe leg problems. She's deaf-mute. But they fell in love and married. Now they're living with her family. And they were taught to make artificial flowers at the village. They now have a new baby, perfectly healthy baby. They have taught their family to make artificial flowers. And now they're able to support themselves and support their mother and father, and they all work together now, and they sell these flowers in their villages. So that's a success story. Maybe it's only one, but it is one. Oh, these are so beautiful.
Everyone touched by Agent Orange had to learn to heal the wounds of war in his or her own way. Yet, the depth of the trauma requires help beyond what individuals can provide. The Vietnam Association for Victims of Agent Orange began legal action against the manufacturers of defoliants used by U.S. forces during the war. The lawsuit was filed at U.S. District Court in New York in January 2004. Nguyen Van Ki, who lives in Haiphong with 2 children and his wife, is one of the plaintiffs. As a North Vietnamese soldier, he was stationed in South Vietnam near Ho Chi Minh Trail between 1972 and 1975. His son, Quan Thuong, born in 1908, was born with spinal, limb, and developmental defects. His daughter, Thi Thuy Nga, was born 1 year later, developmentally disabled, deaf and dumb. Quy himself was diagnosed with stomach and liver cancer, and later with lung cancer.
Everyone in the world, every human being on the planet Earth now has dioxin in their system for the first time in history. The EPA state that 25% of all cancers in America are caused by dioxin. Dioxin is an environmental hormone, that's how it's classified these days, that truly, truly screws up human beings and animal life in general, but particularly human beings. And it comes, you don't have to be sprayed by the American Air Force, it comes from a lot of other sources. And in an attempt to find out more about it and to work out whether there could be some antidotes that could be used or how to cut down on it, the place to do the research is Vietnam. And of course it's the one place that America won't go near. That's the place that holds the answers because of this group that wasn't sprayed and the group that was sprayed, and the difference between them, and the difference is the answers are to be found in Vietnam. But for political reasons, and only political reasons, the Americans won't go there to do that research. Because if they did the research, they would have to pay compensation, and that would, as it were, prove guilt. And that's the one thing America refuses to do, is to claim responsibility for what they did.
When the spraying of Agent Orange was suspended in April of 1970, the U.S. Air Force had an inventory of 1.37 million gallons of the herbicide in South Vietnam. Under the operation named Pesa Ho, all of it was transferred to Johnston Island in the South Pacific in 1972. After sitting in storage for 5 years, the Agent Orange was transferred from old corroding drums into new ones, and then destroyed aboard the Dutch incinerator ship Valkanus in 1977. The United States Air Force was required by the Environmental Protection Agency to conduct extensive research on the environmental impact, and the special safety measures needed to carry out this ocean dumping procedure. On April 7, 1977, 3 shiploads of Agent Orange from Johnston Island were incinerated somewhere in the North Pacific Ocean. Though some of the defoliants may have disappeared this way, the dioxin left in the soil of Vietnam is still very much in existence. It is affecting 3 to 4 million people in Vietnam even today, leaving irreparable scars in the environment.
We were young at the time of the 1968, 69, 70 revolution, of youth revolution, where people were actually fighting against the older generation. Now you have people involved with video games and fighting in imaginary foes. But you don't have people actually looking at politicians and the environment and fighting that. So they've been diverted into a whole nother virtual reality rather than real reality. And it's very difficult to get a bunch of 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds to say, well, hey, you know, there are things going on in our society that are really, really wrong. And why don't we get them to see it? Virtual reality is being sold as the way to be and be cool. I'm cool because I have the best virtual reality thing in the world. But nobody looks at the reality around them, the rivers, the mountains, the streams, the air. They don't consider that this is being destroyed. You know, you make a little mark, who knows? Maybe something changes, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Long time passing, where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago, where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flowers, everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the
Shortly before Greg became fatally ill, as we were turning off our reading lights one night, he said, "You know, I think the universe is like a whole big organism. We are like little molecules. We come and go." We agreed and went to sleep. After he passed away, I was always asking myself, where did Greg go? Then in time, I came to realize that he did not go anywhere, for where could he have gone? All is connected. We are all part of one big thing, whatever we choose to call it. We may be helpless little creatures in the scheme of the big thing, but we are endowed with immense power once we come to recognize how we, human beings, are all we have for each other. Recognition and respect for life in all its diversity is all that is asked of us. In the barren land of desperation, somewhere deep in the soil, a seed of hope is starting to germinate. A seed that has to be nurtured carefully, for it is ever so frail.